those two roles?
So yeah, it wasn't in changing titles, right? And we're always very forward thinking. I like to say the cliche about any cliche you can think of about change, that's us. We're, you know, when we're hiring, when we're interviewing, when we're looking for individuals, we're very clear about we're not in a constant state of change, but we're always forward thinking. And so the challenge around that is industrial distribution, as you alluded to in the beginning, right? It's not like the newest venture out there. It's been around forever. And so you have a lot of individuals who kind of think about it one way, and they perceive their value or their role very much in a box. And they're really good at getting deep into that particular role as it's always been, right? So we have folks that have been around for 40 years in a CSR role or different roles within the organization. So some of the challenges are obviously the change management pieces, and people aren't going to come along at the same pace. And so we really had to look at our culture, and I don't know about every other organization, but as you're growing into a larger organization, you just assume your culture's evident, right? Like, this is who we are. We called it stellarness, right? And we really had to get intentional about what was our culture, what are our values. You know, we've always had a mission, a very strong mission. We always knew what our values were, but we really didn't put it on paper and in a visual, and put it in a way where we could get that to everybody in the organization. And so that really helped us. So putting value and our value proposition in our culture helped bring along individuals where we were saying, okay, now you're around customer experience, and they couldn't really connect the two. So I would say it's in change management in some of those roles that are just really deeply rooted and have seemed to be the same forever. CSR being probably one of the biggest.
Yeah, CSR and sales are probably the two roles that are maybe the most ripe for disruption in these markets, right? And I want to dig back on some of those things. So let's put a pin in that. All right, I have to be honest, right? When we talk about customer experience, I sometimes all right, sounds good, but how do I make more money? Right? Like, where's the profitability in that? Because like, I'm in, like, it sounds good. I want to be on that, but I need to be profitable. And how am I going to do that? So we got to stock and lock and get boxes out the door and get sales moving. How have you actually seen this impact either top line, bottom line, and is it actually measurable?
It is measurable, and it was funny. I was thinking about, I knew you would ask me this question, and I'm not the best data and numbers person. My focus is always on process and continuous improvement, and that's where my brain goes. And so I really looked back and I thought, I can tell just from a sense of how well things are running, our customer retention. And that's a huge piece of it from a profit standpoint is it's really important to keep the customers that you have. And so applying the resources that we have to the customer experience and not just bringing on new customers, but customer retention, there's profitability in that. I don't know, for the group, onboarding a new customer, not only is there risk, but there's always a lot more expense in onboarding than there is in maintaining that relationship. But I did look back and our revenue per employee has increased almost 28% over the last 9 years. So that's huge to us. And our headcount is actually down since 2015. Our headcount's down around 30%. And where that's going to sound like we're cost cutting, and that's going to affect customer service and service to customer service, it's really not, because what we're doing is we're able to apply the resources, and using automation, we're able to apply resources in a way that makes us more profitable. So we're just being very intentional about those resources.
That's super interesting. So you, from 9 years ago,
Mhm.
when you kind of started down the journey of saying, hey, we're going to be customer experience focused and kind of meld a lot of roles together, you've reduced headcount. Have you increased sales as well, or has sales been stable, which is driving just the reduction of headcount is how you get to 28%, growth per headcount, or, how
Yep.
does that look?
Yeah, we have increased sales. In that time period, we've done some acquisitions. Um, and then just really been intentional about what roles we want in the organization. We don't build roles just to have those roles or titles, or we're very intentional about our organizational structure as well, which helps us be more focused on customer experience because we're not just creating roles to do work. So we look at it from the standpoint of not what is the work we need to do and how do we put a person in place to do that work. We look at it almost in the reverse, where we say, what is the result we're looking for? What are the functions that we need to do to get that result, which really helps you pare down the next level, which is the tasks and the work to do that function. So it sounds very clinical when I talk about it that way, but when we look at it in that fashion, then we're not just bringing on, what is really a fixed expense in an FTE and just giving that person work to do. Because again, I'm sure it's true in every organization, people are going to be busy because they want to be productive and they feel like busy is productive. But we're just very intentional about what's the result that we want and how do we want to resource that. And our first go-to is never to hire a person unless it requires some expertise that we don't have.
Yeah. It's so interesting because if I were to start or go into a distribution or manufacturing business today, I would say, okay, I've got to have some warehouse and operations people, right? Because I got to pick and pack products and then get it out the door. I'll figure out my shipment method. I'll figure all that out. Definitely have an outside sales team, right? My outside sales team is going to be going out in front of customers, knocking down net new business, retaining customers, and I have a CSR staff. And what they do is they answer the phone, and what they also do is they probably enter a lot of emailed orders. And maybe there's some challenges or problems that customers have. They'll handle those when they have time in between. That's kind of the way I'd set it up, and there'd be layers of management, things like that. It's the way I've always thought it was kind of looking, right? But when you talk about it, it feels so San Francisco Bay Area, like new age. What does the CSR role look like at Stellar Industrial?
Right now, first I have to say, Alex, always can tell when someone's a salesperson because you make it sound so easy about when the order comes into the system and then the order's received at the customer. So I love how you think about those processes.
Well, yeah, and the outside sales part, that's the difficult stuff, right?
It
Like,
is. It really is hard to say yes to everything, and then we'll just make it happen for you,
yeah.
Alex. So yeah, the CSR role, I would say, like we talked about before, it's probably been the least evolved role over time, at least in our organization and probably in a lot of industrial distribution. And right now, with we have a goal of 70% of our order lines to be automated by the end of the year. But the CSR role right now is it's much more, I like to think it's much more customer facing. I think we've created the space. And what I mean by customer facing is really just not just receiving an email, but being able to provide sourcing options, being able to provide, especially during COVID. And I can't believe we've gone 17 minutes and that hasn't come up. So I feel really good that we're headed in the right direction. But especially during COVID, how do we provide substitutes for items where we're having supply chain disruption? How do we even make CSRs aware of supply chain disruption so they can have that conversation? And we needed to make this space for that. So the CSR role, we focused very heavily last year in transforming what that is with the tools that we've been building over the last 3 to 5 years. But we took the opportunity last year during what was already massive disruption in the world, not just in our space, and said, what can we do and how can we bring this forward faster? So um, I can go deep into what the CSR role is.
I
How
want
far
to
you want me to go?
I want to get a little bit tactical here, because I
Okay.
think this is, you don't have to, give us the secret sauce and what makes you different. But, when we were talking, I thought it was light bulbs going off, right? In my head, when we were talking about it, you're like, yeah. And it was so nonchalant, right? It's how I know it. This is just like a natural world for you. You're like, our CSRs aren't tied to a branch. Our CSRs are floaters. They can work in any branch, and they don't just have set activities or tasks they do. They really kind of develop their own role into solving problems and solutions for customers. And for me, it was like, what? Like, they don't have like, you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tasks. That's what you do. You do it all day. So talk a little bit about that evolution and the actual structure of the CSR. I love hearing that.
Sure. So we have 12 locations, and we've grown very much by acquisition. So we have those. I like to say, what's special about the location is special about the location, but all of the work doesn't need to be location based. So our CSR role is really developing into a more centralized functional area. And again, I don't know that any of this is groundbreaking, but when you're trying to create this change, again, in a space that's 150 years old and or more, and then an organization that's we've been in business for gosh, almost 40 years. So when you're trying to create change, it is kind of groundbreaking for us, but our CSR world, what we're able to do is to have CSRs in any branch location, both do what's specific locally, because we didn't want to lose that. If you're serving the Tampa market versus you're serving the Tacoma, Washington market, there's something special about each of those locations, right?
That's what makes it different than the big guys too, right?
Right. Yep. Exactly. As an independent, right? We look at being an independent as a huge plus for us versus the larger, the big guys, as you mentioned, because we can be flexible, because we have some fluidity to what we do. It doesn't mean we don't do it without rigor around process. It just means we're able to flex a little more. And our CSRs, as we're going down and we're in this journey, and we're still in this journey of transforming the CSR role, they have the flexibility to do what they need to do, either within their location, or maybe they're serving multiple locations because they have a particular product expertise, or they have their skill set is really an attention to detail. So that makes sense over several branch locations, and they're able to do that. So what automation has done is really it takes a lot out of, okay, you're going to get this email order to you. I need to know everything about that customer because there's all this nuance, and I need to know exactly what to put in because Joe really likes it if I put this in the special instructions, things like that. Creating automation and using the system to get those orders in and out correctly for each customer takes the risk out, but it also means that any CSR can service that order once it's in the system, or can help customers when they're calling in looking for solutions that really aren't order related.
So you had mentioned that some of the different things of automation, and obviously no secret, this is being hosted by Conexiom today. So automation is a portion of the customer experience transformation. And so when we were talking, you had actually talked about how with Conexiom, you're able to reduce some of the headcount in the CSR staff and then break it out into different functions. Can you talk a little bit about like, what do those groups look like now, and how do you split out those roles and responsibilities? And then I also am super curious about like the transformation of like the mindset of those people, because you're not going to be able to, not everyone in your organization is like ready for this change. Maybe they're
Right.
a new role, I'm afraid, or I've been doing it this way for 20 years and you want me to go do what? So can you talk about the breakout, the separation, the reduction, and then the process there too?
Sure. So what we didn't want to do, so our goal really isn't looking to reduce headcount, right? We didn't go in it thinking we needed to reduce headcount. Again, a year ago, we did look at it and say, how do we avoid reducing our headcount? How do we avoid losing people as the pandemic really got into full swing? We didn't want to lose anybody. And so we said, how do we utilize the CSR transformation to get some work done that we may not have had time to do? So it was a lot of things coming together. It was the customer experience journey, and then again the disruption, allowing us to put what we call different work streams together to really get either projects done or move things forward that we wouldn't have normally had time or expertise to do. We focused very heavily on getting as much automated as we could so that we could utilize the CSR capability. And we have absolutely amazing CSRs from the most experienced, like I said, who've been there for, they've been in the space, not with Stellar, but they've been in the space for 50 years doing that role, to brand new CSRs that have been with us for a couple of years. All amazing, all have different skill sets like you were alluding to, Alex. And so it wasn't as if we were trying to move this group from one box into another box. We probably didn't even have boxes. We didn't know exactly what that work would look like, but we put together work streams, and whether it was around creating training opportunities or around our website development, really outside of the CSR space, we couldn't have done it. Again, the pandemic gave us, when I look back at it, I'm like, oh, it was a huge opportunity.
In disguise, right, Molly?
Right. It was terrible. I wouldn't ever do it again, but how do we, I guess, make lemonades out of the lemons? We had all this time, we had these amazing people. So how do we use that talent in other ways? And a lot of it was around process improvement and just things that were going to move us forward, where when we came out of last year, we'd be, so much farther ahead in areas where we needed to be. So during that time, you do realize you've got a little bit of a gap, because if you're a person who does a really great job in your role and what you're doing, the last thing you want to do is let go of that, because your belief is, this is where I provide value. And so it really was either individual consultations or creating a path that wasn't painful. And that's not always easy to do. But we're big believers in, if you're very clear about the why, then people will follow. And then you just have to make sure you're skilled at seeing the gaps that exist and working to fill those gaps. And it's not perfect. It's still not perfect. We're still doing a lot of management around that change, but we did find that the CSRs that did jump into those opportunities and focused on automating, what they could, not holding on to something that they felt, this is what I do really well, but moved in and opened their world up to be part of these other work streams, call on customers with salespeople. That was another big one that we introduced, was for CSRs to be customer facing a couple times a quarter. And again, before now, customer facing meant like this, right? But still, sometimes a CSR hadn't really met the customers that they were servicing. So it allowed them to have those conversations. Now they're taking plant tours. But to Alex, to your point, not everybody was excited about that. Not every customer service individual wants to be a customer facing sales type individual. So we had to stay really away from it being a black and white change. It went along in our customer experience journey. So we had set some context, but I'll tell you, the ones that are jumping in are more engaged, I think they're finding more job satisfaction. We haven't done our engagement survey yet, but I'm looking forward to measuring that, and are are getting some career development that they might not have gotten had we just left that role alone and said, you're really great at entering orders, you're accurate, orders are on time. Now I think about that and I'm like, if I ever told anybody that before, I feel terrible, because being really great at entering orders is like, okay, thanks.
Yeah, it's kind of a, you're good at a pretty basic task, right?
Great at dialing the phone.
So there's two Conexiom questions, specific Conexiom questions, but before I dive into those, we're going to get right to them. I had a question about, I read an article from MIT, right? And I think it's always interesting when you hear studies coming out of Harvard or MIT, and it's like, okay, how does this really apply to the real world? And so this study was, automation is actually an investment in your people, right? Where most people are looking at it as like, well, like, isn't it actually taking their job away? And the way they explained it and laid it out was, they said, when you automate the task that was manually being done, it gives them an opportunity to go do something that's of more value to you and your organization, which ultimately is an opportunity for them to go get their own promotion. Have you seen the salary wage actually go up of your CSR staff? Have you seen some of that? And have you seen like people rise to the occasion or develop a skill set you never thought they could before?
We have seen people develop a skill set, and I don't even know if it's as much developing it as we uncovered it and created the space for them to utilize it. So from uh, participating in marketing, from again participating more at the customer, we have a CSR who now is looking and thinking, I really want to go into the outside sales space because I really enjoy this. And I don't know that they would have known that had we not nudged CSRs uh, towards that opportunity. So I think we're uncovering a lot of skill sets that we might not have realized before, that brings value to them, right? And hence, again, you want to go home every day and have some joy and have some satisfaction in what you've done. So I think we've increased that. But I also think we have introduced new skill sets to individuals that may not have known they wanted new skill sets, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think not knowing, right? There's a lot of
Right,
the apprehension of, I can't do anything else. I've been doing it this way for 20 years. And so I think
right.
that's normal, healthy skepticism. Um, so digging into a couple of Conexium specific questions, there was some that came in. So obviously there's going to be exceptions. Not every order that comes in is going to be able to flow seamlessly through to whatever ERP. You're obviously on Profit 21.
Mm-hmm.
We work SAP, Eclipse, Infor, doesn't matter. But ultimately, there's going to be exceptions. Customer orders with a part number we've never seen before, and it certainly isn't one of yours. Pricing just doesn't match. We don't have a quote for it, and it doesn't match their list pricing.
Yep.
We find as Conexiom is 20% of the time, there will be some sort of true exception like that. The value of Conexiom obviously is that we account for those things and can do translations on the data so that there's not exceptions. But the question is, who's handling those exceptions now? Is it still your CSR staff? And how much time are they really spending doing that versus all those other cool new age stuff that you talked about?
Yeah, good question. So the CSRs do handle the exceptions. So they get a quick alert that something's stuck and they jump in and fix it. Again, culturally, we're very much, if you have to go in and fix that order once, let's identify in the mapping, get to root cause and fix it so it doesn't happen over and over. So it usually is something that we can fix either, like you said, Alex, on our end, or we just fix with the mapping, but the CSRs grab grab those exceptions. And I'm a huge, everything should flow through and we manage the exceptions versus let's look at every order because one might be wrong and you've got 99 that are right.
Yeah, I think,
yeah, so that happens at CNC.
as you say, for some people, letting go is difficult, right? And so did you actually go through a transition period before letting it flow through? Did you always have a review? Or did you have a review before you kind of let go and let it flow through?
Yeah, I think we do, right? We have a test period. The last thing you want is for your customer to learn the lesson for you, right? I do not want to learn lessons via our customers. However, going back to our collaboration model, our sales team is fully supportive and engaged in this process. So they are all about they see the value, and I may be retreating from your Conexiom question, but I want to make sure I make this point, is they see the value in the CSR not doing data entry. So if you're an outside salesperson at Stellar, you value your CSR's time to help solve problems, to help, be customer facing, do all of those things I talked about, because they're an extension basically of you. If you're doing it correctly, right? They're an extension of you managing that relationship with the customer. So they're on board. They create a space with the customer to say, here's what we're doing. We're getting you set up on an automated order system. You might experience, this is when we're testing. It's very transparent with customers as well. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I think it does, right? You kind of went through the natural evolution of some touches before we have a customer's orders flow through, seamlessly processed, and then head out to the warehouse. So there was another question about who did the mapping? Is it IT? Was it your CSRs? Who spent the time like coaching Conexiom on some of the business logic that is unique and custom to Stellar?
So we have a department within Stellar that's our solutions department, and they handle everything from our on-site vending solutions, inventory integration, all of the vending software. So it's really not IT. We have a solutions person that does that. We're actually looking at passing along some of the mapping capability to our CEMs, or our CEMs, customer experience managers. So they were what used to be our branch manager, but evolved into what is a customer experience manager. So we're looking at, it's not, I think I could do it, which means it's not that technically challenged. I like to use myself as an example, but we're looking at that so we can actually keep it moving faster. I'm telling you, automation is one of those things that it's almost like a drug. Once you start, you just want more and more and more of it, because you realize once you start to see the value of it. And again, a lot of it is in the faces and the enjoyment of the CSRs and what they get to do once you get over that hump. But yeah, it's in the solutions area. So I think it's less technical once you learn how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned something there. You're like, it's like a drug. You want to do more and more. I think, and I'd be curious your thoughts on it. I think it's like the progressive realization that why would I ever have a human do a manual task when I could have a machine do it cheaper and more accurately? When the opportunity cost, so one, there's a cost savings that's inherent. I'm not going to get rid of that person, but there's an inherent cost savings in the labor, but all the opportunity cost. So is that the way you kind of, how did you justify that? How did you see that initially? And has your perception of that changed over time?
So I think I understand.
If it was complicated, then I probably didn't ask it very well.
I'm trying to unpack that question a little bit so I can. So are you asking about the investment in automation, or utilizing the cost savings from automation? how do we utilize that, or both?
Yeah, the realization of how to justify the cost,
Oh,
right?
yeah, yeah. It was pretty simple to justify it. Again, once you start seeing the value that your CSRs can provide in either growing your business, enhancing existing business, improving your processes. I mean, again, you name it, they're working in work streams all across the business, and it's really not just CSRs; it's other individuals within the organization. But can I dollar for dollar quantify that? I probably could if I took the time to do it, but I don't see the value in taking the time to do that, because I know it's happening.
Yeah.
I know that we have a more engaged workforce. But the cost for me, when you really start to break it out by number of lines, number of orders, and it's funny, we're going to move our metric from order lines automated to orders and number of customers touched, because it's really getting the order in, whether it's 1 line or 10 lines, that takes the most time. So we're going to start looking at it a little bit differently, so we can continue to move in that direction. But we really didn't have trouble justifying that cost. It really made so much sense, and we didn't get down to dollar for dollar justification, because the cost of it was a lot less than even paying a CSR, but then not necessarily even just the cost of the CSR, but the cost of not utilizing the CSR and what they could best be doing, right? So
Yeah.
it's like that old commercial, it might be priceless.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think people who've not dipped their toe in automation struggle to have that same realization that you do, because they look at it and they say, yes, I know it's cheaper than my human doing it, but now I have to have my human do something else that is of value to replace that. And as a leader,
Yep.
that puts some onus on me to kind of give direction and accountability, and it puts onus on another individual that I might have concerns if they can take that step. And
Yep.
so I actually had a client that had moved forward. They talked to another customer of ours on a reference call, and he said, just do it. Stop thinking so much and just do it, because I promise you, you'll look back in a year and say, I have no idea how we used to operate that way. It's like people who, you go from, I don't know, an old school flip phone to an iPhone. Like, I don't know how I managed my business, because I can manage anywhere now, where I couldn't have before I had that. So I just thought that was really interesting to hear. And he shared that with me. He's like, hey, your reference actually kind of threw the light bulb out for me.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I don't know how I got a coherent text off having to press 33322, whatever, however it is we used to text.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Although autocorrect probably makes it even worse than it was with my flip phone.
Yeah.
So you do just have to jump off, but more importantly, you have to set the context. And it is part of our ongoing culture that we're always looking forward. We call it the bleeding edge, not necessarily the leading edge. But you do have to get, like, it's one thing to have our senior leadership team on board, right? Because we're seeing all the data, we're looking at, the longer term plan. We know where we want to go. We might know, where are the acquisitions? Why do we need to free up capacity? But it's getting it down to the next management level and explaining the why. And so that can be a challenge, because again, we're still on that journey. So we do still have some folks that are like, I'm going to do it because you're telling me to do it. It's like, that's not sustainable. So you really have to focus on the why and be very repetitive. And then in terms of what are we going to do with that capacity once we have it, you really have to think out. It's not even outside the box. It's probably what you've been thinking about as a leader or manager. I wish we could do this, and just put that list together. I mean, we always have these magic wand sessions, right? Where we go around the room, or like, what could we do? What markets could we get into? even just as basic as what could we be doing better at the customer? And sometimes those are things that sound great, but you don't have time to do it. And like you do just need to jump in, but you need to do it and be very clear about why you're doing it. Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot of time trying to push this to your organization, and what you really want is for them to be pulling it, and that's where the magic happens. Right? When you have managers that are pulling this forward, and all of a sudden you've got a list of, 30 Conexiom setups ready to go, and you're trying to get those through as fast as you can. So that's why I wanted hopefully transfer the mapping to the CEM so we can be a little more nimble in that area.
Yeah, yeah. And almost push it downstream in the organization and let them come to you and say, hey, there's another opportunity for another piece of automation in our business. So
Yeah.
with that said, there's some questions coming in the chat about other use cases. I don't want to misspeak. I think today you're just using Conexiom for sales order automation. Is that accurate?
We have another system that we're using for AP automation. I'm not sure exactly what it is. I would have chosen Conexiom, but I don't. Anybody in my organization will tell you if I have a say so, I will give you the say so. I would control it all, but yeah, just right now for order automation.
Yeah, I think historically there's been some, a lot of people didn't know that we had additional use cases, right? So the AP invoices, the order acknowledgements coming from vendors, RFQs coming in from your customers, sales order automation. And if you think about any inbound trade document that you're getting that has to be manually keyed into a system, is something that can be automated. Yep. So I know that there was some people in your organization that had reached back out to us and said, raised their hand, said, we want more automation. There was a question about, have you looked at our base automation, and are you familiar with the base automation and what that can do?
I have not. I saw that question and I'm like, I don't know what that is.
So for those on the call, the base automation is ultimately the long tail of your customer base, the customers that maybe are ordering 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times a year, where it doesn't really make sense to set up, a map based off of their document. We can use machine learning and artificial intelligence to essentially knock out your complete order volume on the sales order side or the AP invoice side, so that it's not just specific to your large volume customers. And obviously that's a newer product that we released. So appreciate the question, Young. That was a nice product plug there. I appreciate it.
Yeah, if Kasimka's on this call and she has talked to us about it, I'm going to be in huge trouble. So
I don't know. I spoke with Kasimka. I don't know that she has.
Okay.
I think you're off the hook on that one. You're okay.
Phew.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this has been a fantastic conversation. I could go on for who knows how long talking with you about just the transformation in your organization. When your executive team is looking at automation, you mentioned retention is a big thing because you focus back on the customer experience. Are your CSRs doing any net new selling today? Have you thought about doing that, or is it mostly retention focused?
No, our CSRs, again,
I shouldn't call them CSRs, right?
No, they're CSRs. They're still CSRs.
Okay.
For now, there's an evolution to that as well. But again, we don't want to get too cute and funky with titles because that can drive people crazy too, right? So CSRs do follow up on leads. We do have them participate as part of marketing programs, and we do it in a way that isn't, hey, now you're a salesperson. So they could be add-on sales to existing customers. It could just be clarifying a list of leads for an outside salesperson. So they do some new net selling as well. And again, it's based on the skill set. So we realize that we have some CSRs that love to do that, and then some that would rather not. And so we give them the opportunity to participate in some other work that still needs to be done to move the business forward. So we have experienced, again, sometimes it really just is giving the space and uncovering some of that, and giving them there's a little uncomfortableness in it, right? But once they get past that, it's like, oh, okay, I really like to do this, and this is how I can provide value. So we do have some CSRs that, again, I think there's a couple that really want to go into that outside sales space. But we're more than likely going to build out our inside sales department. So
Yeah.
it's an opportunity.
When we talked a couple weeks ago, you had talked about price increases and kind of you were like, hey, we used to do price increases and kind of like, oh, let's see what happens. Like it was a little like, oh, it's a little scary. And now it's like we do price increases because we know our value outkicks the value of the cost, and we know we're not the lowest cost, provider. Can you still operate in that way post pandemic when people might be more price sensitive than ever before? Are you still able to operate like that?
Absolutely. And I think we have to. I think we're fortunate at this point, and I'm not knowing that, all of the types of businesses that are on the call, but everybody's experiencing. I mean, we've had, 3 price increases from one of our largest manufacturers just this year. So we have to be. It's really testing what was a really great practice, and now it's critical that we do that. So the bigger value we provide, it's so much easier to go to a customer where you're providing that documented cost savings, which is huge for us, either around process improvement. Sometimes automation reaches into the customer space and makes it easier for them to get an order into your system because it's going to get processed faster. Their turnaround time and lead time is less, right? So a couple days can make a difference, but it's critical for us now because I don't know anybody that's not experiencing some type of price increase.
Yeah, well, especially you talk about your vendors pushing price increases to you, which obviously, it all rolls downhill from there. I think it's interesting. We spend a lot of time talking about supply chain here at Conexiom and how we can help align supply chains. And so that's where these other use cases really come in the speed of transacting. So you talked about it on the customer side, and you were like, hey, our customers like it because they send an order and their order is processed in under 2 minutes, which means if my last truck's going out at 5 p.m., they send an order at 4:40. We can have that item processed, that order processed, picked, packed, and potentially delivered same day. And I know we have clients that we have that is the big value add, is the customer experience, is the speed in which we can process an order, get a ticket printed in the warehouse, picked, packed, shipped, and that's a differentiator. That's literally a competitive advantage. The other area that is interesting when we talk about supply chain is the speed in which you can transact with your vendors. So if your vendor sends you order acknowledgments, we see things like order acknowledgments will come in 1, 2, 3 times for the same purchase order, right? Hey, we're going to put a ship date 3 weeks out because supply chains are messed up, and we think it's going to be 3 weeks. 2 days later, actually, we can get you this product in 2 days, this product in 2 weeks, and then there's a third one. So being able to update that information in real time and then convey that message down to your customer base about products and when they're going to be delivered, that's where it really becomes a figure 8 full circle, where you can transact and discuss with your vendors about when product lines are going to be delivered, get that information down to your customer base. So there's alignment all the way through down the supply chain. So I thought it was kind of interesting when you had mentioned that, and maybe order acknowledgments is something we should step into for a conversation. So
absolutely, because expediting is another one of those where it's a ton of labor, and I always say I really don't want to spend a lot of time on the fish already in my boat. I want to catch new fish, right? So the more time you're spending on order management in a manual fashion, the less value, right, to that order. So expediting, working with our suppliers, getting that information to flow through our system automatically and back the other direction is a huge focus for us. So yes, we should talk about that.
It's really aligning a supply chain. You're an extension
Right.
of the vendor, delivering a value and an additional service that the vendor can't provide to your customer. So I love that. I love that.
And the human value, there's not a lot of human value in that. And I hate saying those words because it sounds like we value humans so much that we don't want them necessarily doing that work that can be done automatically. They can be working on sourcing and substitutes and really looking for other products for the customer in the background, trying to solve those issues.
Right. Or working with a different vendor to supply the product that's not going to get there in time.
Yep.
And so every time your employee is spent manually keying in an updated order acknowledgement and new ship dates, and then trying to go manually articulate that down to your customer, what they're not doing is they're not saying, that's not okay. I've got to source a new product because my customer needs that next week, not 2 weeks from now.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and I think that's why you call it's like a valuable task, right?
Right. Yep.
There was a question about quotes and quotes converting to purchase orders. Are you guys? I don't know. Is Stellar getting a lot of quotes in before people are purchasing?
We don't do. We do quoting. We're like not so excellent that we don't have to quote. We just have customers ordering from us because we do some quoting and we do some conversion of quotes to orders. I think the majority of what we do, however, is inventory replenishment. We're less transactional and more integrated inventory solutions and other keep fills, things like that. So that's the majority of our business. Yep. We do quotes and convert quotes to order. So I'd love an automated way to do that.
Yeah. So there was a question from a gentleman named Chris out in the audience, and he had said, "Hey, can you process quotes, or is it the order side, or which side can you handle?" And so I just want to kind of address that real quick. So anytime that there's an inbound document that's of some sort of structure, we can automate that. So if an RFQ comes in some sort of structured layout, or it's off your website, some sort of document, Excel, Word, PDF, that can be, that is sent in, we can automate the actual quoting process. And then that purchase order that comes in, we can automate the flipping of that order or that quote into an order. So there's a lot of nuances that go into that and details that would need to be ironed out through a process and scoping.